Kyle Shanahan spoke this afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, and said that, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo, it's still on the table that he could be the starter against the Arizona Cardinals, but he's not starting. He's not practicing on Wednesday. So door's not closed, but he is not practicing on Wednesday, which, veterans can definitely miss half a week of practice at quarterback and play in the game. But should this still be on the table? Is it actually still on the table? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of crazy because Jimmy talked today and starting quarterbacks talk on Wednesday. Now, he is the starting quarterback, right? I mean, before what happened on Sunday. But to me, things changed on Sunday. He got injured, and he wasn't, even when he was on, you couldn't score points. Like, to me, Jimmy's a better version of Dalton, but these guys get treated. I feel like some of these bridge quarterbacks, and Jimmy's probably slightly better than a true bridge quarterback, but that is kind of his role in this team. You could never lose your job to injury to Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, older veteran quarterbacks who have proven for years. I don't get why Jimmy gets on this scholarship once the season happens. I understood coming into training camp, keep him on the roster. We don't know about the young quarterback. And even when the young quarterback looked good in practice, Kyle would say, it's only fucking practice, who cares? Even when the preseason games, I do get it. But then once you have evidence on the field of like, this guy's not lighting the world on fire. And even when he had probably his best quarter of the season against Seattle, like, you guys weren't scoring points. So I don't understand why he gets treated like he's on some scholarship to be the starting quarterback when he is not, like he's not giving you some huge advantage. Now, are you so close-minded? And what close-minded is the wrong word. Are you so stubborn in the fact that what you believe Trey brings to the table is not good enough to beat a team as good as the Arizona Cardinals? I would somewhat understand that, but like what Jimmy's bringing to the table right now, especially if he's not going to be 100% healthy, which clearly he's not, I don't think gives you a, I don't see how that separates him from Trey.
Yeah.
I don't quite get it.
So I would start Trey Lance. Let me start with that. I would start Trey Lance this week. But I think this is a good time to repeat something I said at the beginning of the season. This is more about Trey than it is about Jimmy. Trey Lance's readiness is the most important thing here. Like Jimmy Garoppolo, he got drafted by Kyle Shanahan. Trey Lance got drafted by Kyle Shanahan. So he drafted him with the mind that at some point he's going to replace Jimmy Garoppolo with Trey Lance. And so it's just about how long until he feels like Trey Lance is ready to replace Jimmy Garoppolo. And I thought the first 4 plays coming out of the locker room on Sunday against the Seahawks were very telling. They made the decision at halftime to replace Jimmy, not in the middle of a second and third down play call when Garoppolo came limping off, right? If Garoppolo had come limping off after a series and then Trey Lance had to go out there for the next series, and that's what it looked like, 4 straight run plays, I'd go, okay, give them a few series to figure it out. But they had a halftime period to figure out what to do. And they came out with no real intention to throw the football unless they absolutely had to. And as it turned out, they absolutely had to, and they started throwing the football more. So those 4 plays told me that Kyle Shanahan doesn't think Trey Lance is ready to just go win him a football game. Yeah, that's what those 4 plays told me. Now, again, I would start him, John. I would start Trey Lance here. But I think it's more about Trey and whatever Kyle thinks about him than it is about Jimmy, because we know what we're getting from Jimmy.
But here's the thing. Sometimes just because of what a coach thinks about someone doesn't mean he's always right. I mean, we saw it with Nagy and Andy Dalton. And I think I think for whatever reason, Nagy probably likes Dalton more than Kyle actually likes Jimmy. Kyle would get rid of Jimmy in a heartbeat if he thought it gave him a huge upgrade. But just because he thinks that doesn't mean he's correct. Now, is Trey Lance some ready-made, ready to rock and roll right now? No, he's not. But to me, the way Jimmy's playing, like, he is, I wouldn't say he's limiting your ability to win, but he's not consistently helping it. He is not playing at some high level. He is not playing well enough to beat the teams that you're trying to beat in these big-time games. He's at a massive, massive disadvantage because he can't make big plays. That's part of the problem. He can't make big plays, and you're playing these teams that have huge play potential. And it goes back to just the offensive philosophy And if I hear one more time, I'm going to rip the hair out of my head that I don't even have about like everything's predicated on the run game. I'm sorry, as an offensive coordinator, you just got to figure this shit out, especially sometimes we've heard forever like the shitty offensive coaches when they're like a head coach who's known as an offensive guy, but his offense is shitty. It's like, well, Adam Gase, he's an asshole. His offense isn't working, but in fairness to him, they don't have any skill guys, right? So what do you expect him to do? Like that is not, and that happens a lot, in certain situations, right? They just don't have the talent. It's like, well, in fairness to Adam Gase, they didn't have that much talent. That is not the case with Kyle. I mean, he's fucking his fullback sweet. He's got multiple receivers. Hell, his third receiver, Sanu's pretty good. They got guys that can make plays. He's got a star tight end. And it's like their passing game is like, well, if they can't run it, like, I'm sorry, Kyle. Like, it's 2021. You should be able to somewhat scheme the passing game and turn them into points. And for whatever reason, these really last 3 weeks, they just cannot score points. And at least this guy might give you the ability to make big plays. Because it's not like, well, we just got to stick with Jimmy. He's what we know. Well, it's not working. It's not.
Well,
and if I hear one more time,
but John,
they shredded Seattle. Yeah, for fucking 7 points.
But John, the run game thing doesn't even apply.
Well, yeah, the run game was fine last week.
Trey Sermon was exactly what we hoped he would be. He showed up. They were 5 yards a carry.
But I do think that's a huge talking point with the Shanahan guys. Like, you got to be able to run it. It's like,
no, you're right. I'm just saying, like, that wasn't even what the problem was against the Seahawks. They ran it.
And I'm not like some new age analytical fucking nut job. I love running the football. I think it adds a huge element. Even though I was raised in the NFL by a guy who doesn't really, it's not Andy's go-to thing. I do think I tend to be like a mix. Like, I got a lot of Harbaugh in me. I loved watching Harbaugh run it down Wisconsin's throat. Run it down these teams' throat. I still like to watch these running backs run. Like, there's value in that. But sometimes if it's not working, can you pivot and score touchdowns through the passing game? And it doesn't feel like the Niners, their passing game, and it goes back to Kyle as the play caller, when it really matters, a.k.a. the baby zone, like, can you put up points?
Yeah. The other part of it is Jimmy's mobility is a big part of his effectiveness. His ability,
because he's not an accurate pocket quarterback.
He's pretty good at it, I think, in terms of like feeling his way through the pocket. And we've seen Garoppolo at less than 100%. We saw it in 2020, right? It wasn't very good. We saw it, and then eventually his season ended. But let's say Garoppolo's calf is okay enough that he can play. What I would do with him is I would have him be on the field as the backup quarterback then. But I would not make him the starting quarterback because Jimmy Garoppolo at 100%, this is a repeat of the conversation we had in 2020 when he got hurt. And then it was like, well, he got hurt. And the reminder was, yeah, but he wasn't that great week one when he was healthy in 2020. And here we are again. He wasn't that great when he was healthy. Well, now he's hurt. And him less than 100% is a liability.
Well, because then he turns into like Phillip Rivers or Eli Manning, and that's not the way he plays. Like, even when he's really on, he does have some like playmaker to him, right? He actually did a couple of those things in the Seattle game before we knew his calf was stepped on the first series. Kind of was running around, making some plays. And when I say run around, like within the pocket is kind of how he kind of scrambles up and he dumps it. Like, he's kind of got some of that, which you're right. If he is stagnant, which let's just assume best case scenario, he'd be 75%, right? His movement would be very, very limited. That to me diminishes if he's like on a good day, like Seattle's first quarter was a good day for Jimmy, and relative to the league, that's like a 7.5 out of 10. If like Rodgers, and that's as good as Jimmy gets. Well, his now good day potential is way lower than he has the total ability to be, and his peak and ceiling of that ability is already not that high. So you could get into a position where are you down 21-0, and you're like, oh, fuck, we just yank him, put Trey in, and then you got this like
too late
convoluted game plan thing going.
Yeah. Now, there's another possibility here, right, which is that this is all just part of not letting the Cardinals know what you're going to do.
No problem with that. I don't expect him to be like, actually, we're going to bring up Sudfeld, Jimmy's going to be inactive, and Trey's going to be our starter, and we're going to implement. I understand that. But I would base off Kyle's actions that I would expect Jimmy to start. And I think it's insane.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get a lot of people texting me. They're getting a little... Kyle's got this stubbornness to him. Like, I do not take back thinking that he's an innovative, smart coach. But that does not mean that you could have weak spots. And I think a weak spot right now is like he's so dead set on his offense, what he truly wants it to be, and he kind of has some of the personnel to do it, right? Even with if Trey Sermon's like thinks he can run the ball and play within the offense with Jimmy. And it goes back to what people think. And I know he drafted Trey, so he's open-minded to having a guy with more talent. But deep down, he's like, I can fucking win with anybody. Like, no, you can't. You can't. And this version of Jimmy is not a winnable player, especially if he's going to be 70%.
Yeah, I cannot imagine through all his frustrations with Garoppolo,
Just
through
talk
all
myself
his
out of betting on them at
investigations.
+5.5.
Huh?
I just talked myself out of. Can we put money on the Niners right now at 5.5?
You want to take them +5.5?
No, I'm saying that I just talked myself out of it almost.
Oh, somebody just asked if we have a lock of the week. Yeah, that'll be coming on Friday. I through all of his attempts to replace Jimmy, I don't think he's blind to Garoppolo's flaws. He's not, because he's tried to replace him 6 times. Right? The question is, can he find a way to play Trey Lance, to do something with Trey before he's ready to? When it's clear that the guy that he has is not going to be good enough for this team. Jimmy Garoppolo was good enough for the 19 team. Well, this isn't the 19 team. And I think part of the reason that I'll speak for myself, was so bullish on Garoppolo, particularly early in 19, definitely when they paid him, was I expected him to keep getting better.
We all did.
And you know what? If we're going to give John Gruden a lot of credit for Derek Carr's improvement, because John does get credit for that, then where was the development on Garoppolo? Now, maybe Kyle decided really early he can't be developed any further, and that's why he's been looking for other quarterbacks for, a couple of years. But now's the time. Like, his ability to develop Trey Lance is the whole future. And I think you're right. I see it in the chat. Now, it can be a little misleading, right? The people who are angry, the people who hate Kyle, or not hate Kyle, but the people who think he's doing a bad job are probably more likely to say something. So I want to at least be aware of that. But yeah, there's a disproportionate amount of negativity on Kyle right now.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, this guy's a really good coach, and he had a terrible month. He had or at least a very questionable month. Like, he was off. Like, you saw Garrett Cole against the Yankees. Was he worth the money when they paid him? Of course he was. When he's good, is he one of the best? Of course he is. Was he hurt? I don't know. I mean, the hamstring, whatever. Was he absolutely god-awful against the Red Sox? Yes.
Terrible.
Like, Kyle Shanahan the last couple weeks has been pretty questionable. Andy Reid had rough times. Belichick has rough times. Like, it's coaches. I just think sometimes, like, we can go, like, Sean McVay, I thought last week was fucking pitiful as a play caller. It doesn't mean he didn't coach well during the week, but you can have off games as a play caller. And something I've gotten, some people text me, and listen, what it really said in the press conference, who really cares? Kyle's not big on, like, I was terrible. Like, he does not say that. Now, you could argue, like, Matt Nagy says that too much. Like, he says it, like, every week. But, like, that's not really Kyle's thing. And it always feels like it's just the player's fault. Well, it might be your fault. What Belichick says, you're either coaching or allowed to happen. Like, you've had a pretty shitty couple days or a couple weeks against the big-time teams. And you ended up losing, both of them. And they're pretty, could be devastating losses at the end of the year when you miss the playoffs by a game or two. Hopefully you're even in that spot.
Yeah, to me, they got to get better to avoid. It's not going to be a game or two at the.
Well, I know. I mean, at this rate, but then what happens? So you've just missed the playoffs 5 times in 6 years, or 4 times in 5 years, whatever. I don't even fucking know how long he's been here, but he's just got the one.
Yeah, the worst thing he could do is miss the playoffs and have Garoppolo be his quarterback all year.
Yeah, and that's kind of feels the path they're on.
But
now.
That's where this is the challenge. Is if you think Jimmy gives you a better shot to win, the risk is that you go with him. And then by the time you go to Trey Lance, it's too late to pull you for him to do anything special, right? And now I do think from what we've seen, we'll get to scouting him. I don't think we can look at Trey Lance like he's the guy that can take you to the playoffs in 2021. So I do understand that perspective of looking at Jimmy and saying, I think on a given day he gives me a better chance to win than Trey Lance does. I don't think that's a crazy thought.
But there is a balance to knowing that, like, Fields was awful that game against the Browns. Now, it turns out the Browns' defense is unreal. Myles Garrett, some of these clips I saw against the Vikings look like a high school kid going to Alabama, tossing. It was unfair to the Vikings. But Fields, now it was a shittier team, and we'll see him this week against the Raiders, got dramatically better in a week. Why? Probably more comfortable, just kind of knew the speed. Like, you improve. Like, there's no improvement with Jimmy. So it's like Kyle, and this is where I can be really critical of coaches because I've seen it firsthand. Nothing about the X's and O's, but just about living in the short term. They're obsessed with this week, as they should be. But when you're the head coach / grand poobah, which he is, he's at the top of the pyramid. There's only one guy in the building that's higher than Kyle, and that's Jed York. And if you want to include his parents, there is nobody, not John Lynch, not Parag. There is nobody over Kyle Shanahan when it comes to football decisions. And I think sometimes that can warp your mind. It's actually one of the great attributes of Belichick all these years. He had so much juice, but he could always balance, not a great drafter, but could pivot in season, can make moves like what he did today. He's just always balancing the next 5 weeks, the next year, the next 2 years. Like, that to me would be a knock on Kyle. Like, bro, you're young, you're innovative, you're smart, but sometimes you just get into the just the daily grind of the football season, which assistants, and they just live for the day, as they should. That's their job. Know your job. As the head coach, decision maker, it's tough because you're the coordinator too. There has to be a balance. And I sometimes think his balance, no, I don't think sometimes. Right now, because it's been pretty good. Last year I thought was really impressive, everything he had to balance. This year I think he's a little out of whack. And it might just be he's in a new spot. He's got this young quarterback that he's working through, and he's kind of stuck with Jimmy because he wanted to, because he kept him trying to make the playoffs. And he's got to be able to like take a deep breath, step back, which is hard because you're the play caller, you're running the install meetings kind of too, and just take inventory. I think it can be very, very difficult. History would show us, even for good coaches, when you're the coordinator, I do think it can be a difficult proposition to manage it all.
Yeah.
When there's a ton of pressure, because we've talked about all offseason, you could feel the pressure on Kyle. This decision, drafting Trey. I mean, he basically put financially set for life. He made a shitload of money with the Niners. But, like, his football credibility, like, a lot is on the line for Kyle, not just this season, but the next, like, 3, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Trey Lance doesn't work, he's not going to be the coach of the 49ers beyond Trey Lance. You
wouldn't think.
Now, if they find ways to win and Trey's just not quite good enough, but they're going to the playoffs, then okay, I don't want to be dramatic, but he's all in on this.
Seems like it would be pretty hard for Trey not to be good enough and them for still be good.
Yeah,
right.
It would be. It would be. And I think the last thing you want is to get to that point where you look up and go, oh my God, we're not a playoff team, and you didn't identify the problems that were leading you down that road sooner and make changes before you got to that place.
And if I was going to defend
with Garoppolo, I don't think they're a playoff team right now.
And if I was going to defend Kyle, I would say, well, he didn't set the expectations that we had to make the playoffs, though their decisions. Okay, then that's maybe that's not even fair.
I think they as an organization said, we're re-signing Jason Verrett and we're bringing this team back and we're not changing much and we're signing Trent. You don't pay Trent Williams at his age for like 2 years from now. No, I think they did set that expectation for themselves.
That's fair. Then he gets in this position when the season starts. He's got a first-time defensive coordinator who looks to be pretty solid. Like I think D'Amico's done a fine job this year with what he's had to deal with. The defense has been better than the offense the last couple of weeks. I guess maybe not the Green Bay game.
Emmanuel Mosley, like the corners.
Yeah,
Emmanuel Mosley last week.
They're fine. And he's lost like one of his go-to minions on offense, right? Went with Saleh. So he lost Saleh, a guy that he could lean on. He lost LaFleur brother. Maybe he just doesn't have some of the guys he can lean on. He already has so much on his plate. I think that there is something to be said about like Andy Reid and let's just use Andy as an example. He is a way better coach now than he was a decade ago, and he was unreal a decade ago. Like Kyle's gonna get better with time, but this may just be a season. I'm getting nervous that might just be off. The whole thing just might be out of whack.
Well, yeah, which if he had made the playoffs last year, no one would think anything of.
No one would give a shit. But they never made the playoffs except the 1 year.
And for the second year in a row, they've got a bunch of injuries already.